Welcome to For the Greater Good, a podcast brought to you by the Independent Grocers Alliance. And now your host, John Ross.
Well, hello, everyone. It's John Ross, and this is the Greater Good podcast, which is a show really about how we in the industry, manufacturers, retailers, suppliers, industry associations, how we are working to make sure that this is a sustainable industry and that the industry that we work in today will be around for our children and our grandchildren. So today's show should be a lot of fun. I have Emily Metz. She's the president and CEO of the American Egg Board. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, John, for having me. Pleasure to be here. I'm really honored to be here. So really appreciate this.
Well, you're the first industry association person on the show. Usually these are big CPG CEOs or manufacturers or maybe somebody on the technology side. This is the first time, and I think it'll be a really different take on our industry. And certainly there's a lot going on in eggs, so we'll sort of get into all of that. But I think for the audience, it might be great, Emily, for you to talk about a little bit about your background, because you've got an interesting one, but also talk about the mission of the Egg Board and what you do.
Sure. Happy to do that, John. And I love being first. I'm a little competitive, so that makes me happy that I'm the first trade group CEO, industry group CEO to be on. Well, you covered it well. So I work for farmers. I work for egg farmers specifically, and have spent my whole career largely working for farmers, which is something I was honored to do. My parents would say that I left Wisconsin, went to college in DC, and as a teenager full of angst, I said I never want to see another cow again because we were surrounded where we lived in Wisconsin by dairy cows. And lo and behold, less than 8 years later, ended up working for the dairy industry. So I've worked all over the barnyard, which is, I guess, what we lovingly refer to as the industry groups that represent the food we eat. There's a number of those groups from dairy to pork to beef, of course, to eggs. And I've worked for just about every one of them in some capacity or some form or fashion. And it's been the honor of a lifetime. Agriculture was really the career that found me, John. I started as a speechwriter in college at the Department of Agriculture and got to meet a lot of farmers in that role. And what I found is that the people who produce our food, much like I think the people who probably sell our food, your members, are some of the best people. They care about others. They care about their communities. They're pillars in those communities. They want to leave the world a better place. They're family oriented, family first. A lot of my farmer members now are fourth, approaching fifth generation farmers. And that legacy is something that can never be replaced. And in terms of what motivates me and what made me fall in love with the agriculture industry, it's those things. It's those values. And it's the human beings that work hard every day to make sure that people like me and you don't have to farm for our food and we can go do other things. And I think that's a service that is provided. And yes, people always are quick to say, well, they do get paid for their goods and services. And that is true. But the core of who those people are, I think is unparalleled, and it's what drives me and what made me fall in love with the industry. So the American Egg Board specifically, John, is the marketing arm of the industry. So 40 plus years ago, our farmers came together and they told Congress, actually, the American Egg Board was established by an act of Congress. They said, we want to form an agency that markets eggs on our behalf. And so they did that. Congress approved that, and we're one of 22 similar organizations that whose members have come together and said, we want an organization to market on our behalf. So we are in good company with pork and beef, with Christmas trees and mushrooms and blueberries. But obviously, we're all about eggs at the American Egg Board.
Well, so your description of the family farmer and my description of the family retailer, they are amazingly similar, right? And you go out and spend time with them, and they're committed to their communities. They're engaged in every charitable organization you can possibly imagine. They are exactly what you would imagine salt of the earth to be. If you look that up in the dictionary, you'll find IGA and probably poultry and egg producers as well. So we have a lot of the same kind of service obligations in our two jobs. We're like cousins, right? We're in service to them. If we make them successful, their communities be successful, and with that, then all things are good. So, what would be some examples of things the Egg Board does on behalf of your members?
Well, a host of things, John. First and foremost, we're focused on long-term demand creation. So that obviously involves marketing. We just this summer launched our legacy campaign, a brand new campaign called Meant to Be Broken. Which I think has become a little bit of a rallying cry for the industry, to be honest. There's a lot going on in eggs right now, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But this Meant to Be Broken campaign is targeted at consumers who I think have eggs in the refrigerator, but those eggs are invisible. We do a lot of insights and consumer analysis at the American Egg Board to understand what the consumer wants and needs. There's been huge changes in purchasing behavior. I know your family retailers have experienced that too in the post-COVID world we're living in. And so we really seek to try to understand the mind of the consumer. And one of the things that's come through in all of our research over the last few years is that people forget they have eggs in their refrigerator, which isn't good for anybody, right? We want people to be remembering they have eggs, using eggs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, replacing that carton, which gets them into your stores more often because they remember that oh gosh, I need to swing by the store and get eggs. And we know that when eggs are in the basket, that basket size at your members is higher. And so that's it all kind of comes full circle. And so Meant to Be Broken is really about reminding people, hey, eggs aren't just for breakfast. Let's break those preconceived notions you have about what an egg can do. Let's think about eggs differently. Let's take some risks. And of course, the old mantra, to make a great omelet, you have to break a few eggs. Eggs are, in fact, meant to be broken. So we're really excited and proud of that campaign. One of the other big investments we've made, John, is in our innovation and R&D area. And when we talk about long-term demand, we're really talking about how do we put eggs in front of people in different ways. And again, back to our insights is telling us the younger consumer is struggling to cook. They're not going to bring out the frying pan in the morning to make themselves some eggs before they head to their remote job. The universe has changed. That younger consumer has changed. And so how do we make eggs convenient, snackable, craveable? And that's all about investing in R&D and kind of that innovation piece of things to, again, come up with things that are ready to go. One of the projects we're really excited about that'll be launching and probably on a lot of store shelves soon is our egg white wraps. These are ready to go wraps that can be used like a tortilla, but are high in protein, which we know people are looking for. And they're pre-filled. So they've got meat, they've got turkey, they've got seasoning, they've got flavoring, they've got sauce. And you can just grab them from the retail store aisle, throw them in your lunchbox or throw them in your car, or, go to the gym with it on your way to your workout. And it's a perfect protein solution. So those are the types of things we're really working on and thinking about, is meeting that consumer where they are today.
Well, so, I think that's a really interesting example. So, if we relied as an industry to only exist on the same items we sold last year, we would all be out of business. Innovation drives success inside the stores. This is especially keen for manufacturers, but it's true with retailers as well. Without innovation, the basket shrinks. And the shoppers are, and this is going to be a terrible pun, but they are really hungry for innovation. You talk to them over and over again, and it doesn't seem it when you watch them. Like you watch the shopper in motion, and they're just moving down the aisle, throwing stuff in at speed. But no one wants to eat the same exact thing over and over and over again. They're always looking for a better choice. And then the other piece to it, too, is the word better, as you know, is changing. And so the shopper walks into our store not pleased with the decisions they made last time and feeling like they could have been smarter, or they could have been healthier, or it could have been lower calorie, or could have been less sodium, whatever their mission is. Where they walk in feeling guilty that they didn't have the information to make a smarter choice. And if they leave with the exact same items, then their customer satisfaction is low. So both suppliers and retailers, we have an obligation to help educate consumers. We have a responsibility to help let them know what's new and what's better for them. And when we show them that, they tend to respond in sales. So I know this example of a project we'll work on together as the year goes out, but that's really exciting. So Emily, there's a lot going on in the egg industry right now. I'm sure that your phone is going off constantly and your inbox is always full. There's a lot of craziness. You want to kind of talk about what you see happening in the egg industry right now, and then perhaps maybe some of the things that you're doing to address it.
Yeah. Well, John, I can safely say that I did not anticipate eggs becoming a political conversation. I did not have that on my bingo card for this year.
No.
That was one that we were not prepared for, did not expect. But eggs have been the topic of conversation for everyone in the media in particular for the last year. And it's really ramped up again over the last couple of months. And, I think that's been driven by a couple things. The first is eggs are beloved. I mean, we're approaching a 50-year high in terms of consumption of eggs. We have had 20 consecutive months where our year-over-year sales of eggs, volume sales of eggs, is higher than it was last year. Normally, we see a slump, John, in egg consumption over the summer months just because everyone's outside, they're barbecuing, and we haven't quite, excuse the pun, cracked the code there on how to get eggs kind of into those occasions in the summertime. But that wasn't the case this year. Demand stayed really high through the summer. And I think that's because by and large, people recognize eggs are a very affordable protein choice. And so that demand has remained at record levels of height all year this year. And like I said, we're almost approaching a 50-year consumption high for eggs, which is great news. That's great news. The challenges, though, this year have been we've had less eggs to go around, and we've had less eggs because our farmers have had a very challenging year dealing with highly pathogenic avian influenza, HPAI, also known as bird flu. And there's been a couple of things that have really made those challenges more significant. Our farmers have been dealing with bird flu really since 2015. 2015 was the first major outbreak in the United States of bird flu. Bird flu, for those that don't know, is largely spread by migratory birds. As they're flying, they discard the virus, or they land on property and they leave a feather behind that has virus, and that gets tracked into our farms. The virus is lethal for our birds, unfortunately. And so we have to euthanize birds that have been affected because otherwise, they will die and it's not a pleasant death. So we humanely euthanize those birds. But the challenges of the migratory patterns have been added to this year by the discovery of bird flu in dairy cattle. And because of how kind of agriculture has functioned in this country, a lot of dairy farms are nearby to egg farms. And so there's been a cross-contamination from those dairy farms onto our egg farms who have made great investments in their biosecurity over the years. Dairy has a steep learning curve and those farms don't function the same way that egg farms do. The biosecurity isn't the same level as it is on egg farms. That's added a new element. A lot of the outbreaks this year have been directly tied back to that strain of HPAI in dairy cattle. The other thing that's really exacerbating this, which I actually, from a kind of scholarly perspective, find fascinating, is because of extreme weather, wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, the patterns of migratory birds have been greatly disrupted. So normally we would be able to kind of pick spring and fall migration period. We would see some outbreaks around those time periods. Well, that has not been the case this year. And we're seeing those migratory patterns happen much later. We have wild birds migrating right now, and that's tracking virus with them, unfortunately. And so while normally this would kind of be a dormant virus period, that's not the case this year because those birds are migrating much later due to some of these extreme weather events. And so the virus and the challenges brought by the virus that we were able to, deal with a couple years ago, those are a brand new set of challenges for us this year that we've had to contend with. And all that results, John, in a record number of outbreaks that have affected our egg farmers. And unfortunately, that's impacted about 8% of our laying flock, which means there's just less eggs. And when you have record high demand and a slightly, stressed supply chain, you get high prices. And that's what a lot of people have been talking about this year.
So probably not in modern history have the price of grocery in the United States affected the outcome of an election. And you can see it in what people said in the exit polls, and you can see it in what the candidate who won says, and a lot of other things that are going on. And it is really interesting that the lens of the world that shifted to grocery during COVID because we were heroic and we were feeding people and taking risks, now all of a sudden it becomes the prime example of why the economy is bad or stressful for folks. And this is especially acute for the point of the spear, the cashier or the worker in a dairy aisle or in produce that has to face a customer who's upset about rising prices, right? They are not armed with the information in order to have a scientific conversation about why prices are as high as they are. The shopper's just upset. And they're upset because, their average ticket, which would have been $100, let's say, or $90 back in 2019 is probably $130 today. So it's not just eggs, it's like across the store. So you have this systemic pressure on the system at the time with very complex underlying problems. All we can do at IGA and with our owners, all we can do is education, right? And that's why I'm so excited about our partnership. So you're supplying us the information. We can disseminate that in a way that both the entrepreneurs and their staff can understand. And then we can share that with consumers in a way that allows them to have more context about what's going on in the industry. Talking about it, understanding it, it's our only path out of this. And we stand ready to be your partners as we try to help demystify what's really going on. What's the prognosis, though? I tell you the other thing I want to say, Emily, is when you go visit an American farm, and whatever you have in your idea about what American farms are like, and you go walk in and they're using satellite data to track migratory patterns of birds, and they're using AI algorithms to track biohazard outbreaks and all the rest of the stuff. They are very sophisticated technology going on in a lot of American farms today. What's your prognosis? Are we going to be able to get this under control?
I'm always hopeful. I think, John, I'm my significant other calls me Pollyanna. That's always my mindset is to always be hopeful. Farmers are the original inventors. They're resilient. They're ingenious. And they've learned a lot of tough lessons over the years. And every time that this virus changes, we change as an industry. They change how they manage their operations. We have people over the last few years, John, I always love to use this example, who have installed laser light systems on their farms to try to discourage wild birds from landing on those operations. Like, those are the things that farmers come up with. When a farmer is put under pressure, they will come up with a solution. So I remain hopeful. I think this year, you look at it, and I think if you asked any one of my farmers, they would say it's been a challenging year. From the American Egg Board's perspective, you said it best, John, we're grateful for this relationship we have too, because our role is really to provide the information and provide the facts and arm people with that information. And I think the biggest frustration from my perspective, and probably from my farmers' perspective this year, is politics aside. I think a lot of the conversation that's happened hasn't talked about the real motivation behind, the real reason behind these prices, which is record high demand and a supply that is under stress due to bird flu. And that conversation has largely been absent. And so I think we've gotten swept up in this generalization about food prices, which I know your members have borne the brunt of as well, but it's devoid of kind of those other elements of the discussion, which are really, really critical to that discussion. And so that's been our job at AEB, is to try to add those elements of facts with the media, really educate people, work with partners like you to make sure that you have store signage and talking points and things that you can talk to a consumer who's frustrated and who's trying to understand, hey, why are my eggs, $3 one week and $4 the next week and $2.99 the week after that? And it's because it's a roller coaster of a year because of bird flu.
So, you can't have a podcast about sustainability if you don't have a sustainable industry to begin with. So we've got to be able to have predictable volumes. We got to be able to control our costs. We have to be able to hand these businesses down to our children and our grandchildren, or we're in trouble. And I think this is especially acute for family farms in the United States. As you think about, issues like this, because I know the margins in a family farm and the margins in a family retailer, we are thin margin businesses. and the gap between profitability and being out of business some years seems very, very, very close. As you think about the future here going on, the increasing demand, will we see farmers expanding their farms and creating, and growing larger? Is this a long-term trend, or is this a short-term effect?
Again, being hopeful, I think it's a long-term trend, because I think we're in a renewed environment where people are recognizing the value of protein. And I recognize that I'm biased, John, but there is no more perfect protein than the incredible egg. And so I think we're in a sustained period of growth. I think you will start to see farmers expand their operations when it is safe to do so. I don't know that anyone would choose to do that right now, but I think long term, there is that desire for growth. And one thing about farmers is they always desire to grow and expand and do things better. That's just kind of in their makeup. I think for me, the larger conversation, you talked about sustainable. You can't have a podcast about sustainability without having, industries that are sustainable. And I think we are in a unique moment right now when there is so much conversation about food, when it's become part of the political narrative, when it's being talked about so much, to really have an honest conversation with the American public as food producers and as food, sellers and retailers and manufacturers, to be able to say, we produce in our country the safest, most wholesome food. We sell that food and we bring that to you at an incredibly across the board affordable price. And if you look at other countries, which I know, John, you and I have both had the opportunity to travel a good part of the world in our roles, there are a lot of other countries that spend a lot more of their take-home pay on food than we do in the U.S. And I'm very cognizant of cancel culture, and I'm cognizant of some CEOs who've tried to start that conversation, and maybe they haven't done it in the exact right way. But I do think that's a conversation that's worth having, that's worth starting, and that's worth, pushing for. I think we produce great food in this country. It's abundant. It's safe, which is something that not a lot of, not every country can say. Yeah. And we bring that to people in a, by and large, very affordable way. And I think we have to talk about that a little bit more than we do.
Well, it is absolutely true. So we have 6,600 stores all across the world, right? And then some of these are in some very different kinds of economies than you have in the United States. It's a miraculous food system here. Right, we're able to get fresh product from all over the world delivered to a grocery store with a 98% in stock, and we're doing it for a 2% margin. It is incredible. And the average total basket for an American consumer can often be significant, 30, 40, 50% less than it would be in some other countries for equivalent items, even those produced domestically. There's always going to be an example, though. There's an outlier. How come I can buy X or Y or Z cheaper in this country than in like Y? Or what's happening with produce? I hear this all the time. But if you look at the whole basket, American shoppers are incredibly fortunate. It doesn't help, though. That narrative doesn't help. So when you stand there, because it was $100 a couple of years ago, it's $130 now, and I don't have another $30. So where does this come from? So if energy's up and education's up and healthcare is up and everything's up, right? What gives? And the system kind of shudders like this. It's really tough. It's easy to blame your grocer. I want to talk about protein just really, really quickly, because you can see it in our stores. Every SKU that has anything related to protein. I mean, Spam is up like 20-some-odd% as an industry. Who would guess, right? All these protein SKUs. You go out to a restaurant and they're throwing a fried egg on top of everything now. It's protein, and protein. It'd be one of the areas of our stores, I think, independence. I think we've kind of missed this whole thing from a communication standpoint. We're not talking about protein as much as we can. When you're trying to increase demand and you're trying to increase awareness of it, what are some of the things that you're doing to try to get the egg out of just breakfast and into some of these other meal occasions?
Well, protein is a big one, John, and we certainly would love to help you guys with that and look at more ways to get that narrative out. But our nutrition communications team is focused a lot on protein. You look at kind of how the nutrition consciousness has changed over the last few years for consumers. They are acutely focused on protein. But I think that protein has to be convenient and accessible and easy. And I think that is the gap it's the gap for us from an egg perspective, because there has to be an intermediate step. And whether that's working with independents like you to maybe hard boil eggs, or getting them to you in that format, or doing things like the egg white wraps that deliver that protein, but also check the boxes of convenience and portability and ease of use. That to me is the next step. And I think that's a challenge we can work on together, because we have to position protein with those other add-ons as well. Otherwise, just protein by itself is not going to move. It's not going to move the volume, or not going to move the needle in terms of sales. We have to make it easy and accessible and portable and convenient.
So, this, I think, is a challenge for both of us. Like, if we look at our delis in most independent grocers, fried chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, we know how to do that. We know how to do potato salads and the prepared salads, but there's not a protein menu option. There's not a high protein menu option in a lot of these stores. It would be fun to sit down and imagine how you could use something by adding a boiled egg or maybe a couple of other ingredients inside the store in order to produce another choice that would be on trend with what consumers want, especially younger ones, and achieve all of our goals. So that could be a fun project for us to do.
It could be. I think we could have a lot of fun with that.
So, these shows are always fascinating. I could spend hours talking to you, Emily, about what's going on in the industry and about farmers. I find it fascinating, but I think we should bring it to a close here. So, Emily, when you retire one day, and that'll be a long way off in the future, but when you retire one day and at your retirement party, someone gets up to make a speech about you, what do you want them to say about what you did at the egg board?
I think it would be that Emily broke the rules. She pushed hard. She took risks. She drove the industry forward. I've always been, I think a lot of people who are in the workspace today focus on activity as opposed to results. And I really try every day to focus on the results. And, I try for my team to be the leader that says, we're going to make mistakes, but I would rather make a mistake and learn from it, having taken a risk, than just do something the same way we've always done it.
Right.
And so I hope that that's what people say is she broke the rules. She pushed hard. I think meant to be broken is a bit of a rallying cry for me too, because I think that's very much how I live my life is, if we can build a better mousetrap, we should. And we should push for that. And I think I've learned a lot of that from farmers, because that's very much how they are.
Well, I love that answer, and I love this podcast. You're fascinating to talk to, and this is the punniest of all the podcasts we've done so far. I think there were at least 3. I won't make any other yokes. Leave that joke completely. But I think we. So there's some resources you have. We'll do links to the National Egg Board and some of the marketing that we're doing jointly. We'll put that into the show notes, so if people want to learn more about that they can do that. And I think I'm sure that we'll be back on talking about not only some of the programs we did, but also the results, because we're like you. We want to measure results in the store to see if we can't help manage communications and sell more of the product. So thank you so much. And for all the audience, always thank you for watching it. These shows are free to distribute. We have way more people watch these, on 2 or 3 passes as it goes along. So feel free to forward that. And if there's anyone looking for a transcript, we'd be glad to show those as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.